I'm sure most of you have tasted a fish or two before, unless you're definitely allergic. Once it's on your palate, there's often a very noticeable smelly smell that smells smelly. And after finishing that meal, you might have thought to yourself, man, I could really use some mouthwash. For those who don't know, Mouthwashing is a psychological horror game where a crew is stranded in space with Markiplier.
What's going on?
It was made by Swedish developer Wrong Organ and publisher Critical Reflex, who've had a hand at some small games, nothing really of note. But critically, the developers did make a short free-to-play game in 2022. How fish is made asks a very important question that some might think they have an answer to, but then you get hit with a fish doing a musical number with an isopod. Since the game was made by Swedish devs, they had the chance to do the funniest thing possible. But they didn't do that, so 0 out of 10. Now you might be thinking, how exactly is this a prequel to Mouthwashing? Sure, it's from the same developer, and they have that same PS1 graphic style, but these characters aren't exactly fish. Or are they? Okay, it may not look like a prequel, but it does have some symbolism that ties these two games together quite nicely. Truly, something about this game just reeled me in hook, line, and stinker. How fish is made is unique in that it's difficult to describe, and yet there's so much to talk about. From the outset, we're a sardine plunged into this strange machine, which is very fleshy for some reason. It's not exactly clear what we're doing here, but we do get some directions from the locals. I did a lot of thinking to know which is indeed the correct way. Would you like to know? It might change your entire word view? But isn't that supposed to be worldview? They all seem to be obsessed with this one choice, up or down. While this may seem like an arbitrary multiple choice question, the more we talk to various fish, the more we start to question its significance. It's interesting that the choice is up or down, since most people, religious or not, would normally associate up with something like heaven and down with HE double hockey sticks. However, in this game, this preconceived notion may not be completely accurate. I know all of this sounds like I'm overcomplicating a simple 50-50 choice here, which I most definitely am. I am a professional overthinker after all. Going up is red, so maybe it's doing like some reverse psychology thing where it's like saying you should go up, but you're not actually supposed to go up. But maybe it's trying to make us think that way, so it's actually supposed to be up, so you're actually supposed to go up. I'm going down. Speaking as an epic Reddit armchair psychologist, on a subconscious level, reversing that normal color association might make you choose more carefully. And choose you will, as this question is the final decision you'll have to make. As you interact with many fish, each will have various opinions and give you different dialogue depending on which choice you give them. For example, some fish will act a bit cray-cray if you don't choose what they believe is the only way.
No, I think it's down. Can you see it? I think I can see it.
Speaking of dwindling sanity, let's talk about Mouthwashing for a moment. Spoiler warning if you haven't played it yet. Our main cast of characters, Anya, Daisuke, Swansea, and Jimmy, are all employees on the space freighter Tulpar, so anything that jeopardizes the crew's safety could be catastrophic. Well, as we learned from earlier, we can never trust color association, so maybe this big red button is actually going to help us. On second thought, after a certain crew member intentionally crashes the ship, the crew now has to ration their food, be careful not to get sucked into the void, and stay sane. Unfortunately for Curly, the crew's captain, the crash turned him into that one fish from the SpongeBob Chocolate episode.
Ow.
The crew doesn't really know what happened in the cockpit, but Curly didn't seem like someone who would crash his own ship. He was a chill guy after all. This leads to a little finger pointing, gaslighting, and manipulation. I swear this game is just a big Among Us reference. Without spoiling it too much, let's just say someone makes a choice that affects everyone, and yet blames everyone but themselves. On the surface, this sounds like the only connective tissue between these games is a vague choices have consequences kind of theme, but there's a lot more than meets the eye. Going back to the fish game, in our path, a fish got itself stuck in these gears, and it needs our help to get out.
Oh my god, stop bro, I'm stuck.
But what are we gonna do? Slap it out? Maybe this big red button will do the trick. Huh. Really thought it would work that time. Reaching an impasse, yet another fish asks us that same ultimatum. But this one is slightly different from the others we've met up to this point. It tells us that we've been gifted with free will, the ability to choose whatever we want. But that doesn't mean our choice changes the outcome. After all, we're just a small fish in a big pond, and nothing we do will ever amount to anything. Okay, it didn't say that last bit, but the way it's talking, I'm sure it was thinking it. The fish also tells us this is a test of conviction and sticking to our guns the entire way through. but then he pulls a "it's just a prank, bro," so great, now I'm even more confused. As we arrive at the crossroads, we talk with an actual big fish in a big pond who is in the same boat as us. However, instead of choosing blindly, it actually has the knowledge of how many fish went through each path. And we get to choose if we want to have that knowledge too. Basically, it's a GigaChat observer versus the beta doomer. After choosing yes, we find out 199 fish went up and 474 went down. So it looks like I chose what the majority did. But I'm no sheep. I have free will. I don't need to follow the herd. I can shape my own destiny and choose the unpopular opinion. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm choosing the NPC answer. So down we go to become a tuna sub. Huh. I don't really know what I expected. I guess it really was to show how fish is made. Wow. Except after replaying the game, I noticed something. If you reverse the letters in tuna sub, you get this phrase. What could it mean? On a serious note, when you ask that observer fish for those stats, the colors of both choices are back to their normal association. Blue for up and red for down. But why? Maybe it's to throw you off and make the decision harder, or maybe it's a subtle way of telling you the outcome of these choices actually does stay the same. Or it could just be the devs did it by accident. But I believe it's intentional. The reason being, in Mouthwashing, there's a small Easter egg in Anya's stuff. A book that reads up or down the illusion of choice. That concept is used mostly in marketing and uses a consumer's lack of information to make them feel far more in control than they actually are, which seems to paint the picture that no matter which path we took, in the end, it doesn't even matter. So I decided to choose up to see if we actually do get the same ending. And after going up, we fall into this fleshy void, a hive mind of eternal nothingness. So technically, both paths have us falling down. Obviously, what happens after we fall is different, but depending on how you view it, you could also say in both paths, the fish gets consumed. However, in the void ending, our journey doesn't exactly end there. You see, the game has a DLC called The Last One and Then Another, where we roll around collecting anything and everything, Katamari Damacy style. This came out a few months before the first demo of Mouthwashing and a full year before its official release, but it's very clear to me they already had the game planned out well in advance. As we explore, it seems like we're still in that machine we were a part of in the base game, but there's all this gooey substance splattered everywhere. Get your mind out of the gutter. It's not what you think. Okay, maybe it is what you think. Now, it's actually in reference to the sealant foam used on the ship in Mouthwashing, which just coincidentally looks sus. Here, we're presented with another choice: consume or leave. The only problem is, to progress through the game, you kind of need to get bigger, so once again, it isn't really a choice. After consuming fish after fish, we arrive at the Mouthwash motherlode. Once again, we consume another fish, but this time, the voices of the ones we've consumed get louder and louder. I can't tell if they're screams of agony or joy, but all of it blends together as we lose our sense of self. We're becoming one and no one at the same time. Okay, but what does this have to do with Mouthwashing? Well, buckle up, because massive spoilers for the ending. Remember how Anya had that book about the illusion of choice? It doesn't just apply to how fish is made, it also applies to her situation. You see, she always seems to act tense around the main character, Jimmy. For example, when she has a hard time feeding Curly his pain meds, Jimmy aggressively tells her he'll do it himself. The reason for this is Anya finds out she's preggers, and Jimmy doesn't want to take responsibility. At first, this seems like a I don't want to pay child support kind of situation, but the way she reacts to it reveals it's more of a diddler situation. Not wanting to face the repercussions, it's revealed P. Jimmy was the one to crash the ship, slowly consuming everyone around him with his lies. Oh, and he also indirectly and directly kills everyone on board the ship, apart from Curly, who he saves, then offs himself to not take responsibility for his actions. Honestly, this dude turned out to be one of the worst humans you could think of, probably closer to not being human at all, which fits in quite nicely with my little game theory. That little sardine we've been playing as, I believe, is a representation of Jimmy himself. After all, who else shows up in the game but Curly? In a Steam Q&A, a dev confirmed his dialogue in this game was canon to Mouthwashing. So it could be that when we finally got big enough to consume him, this references Jimmy first feeding Curly his pain meds to keep him quiet both figuratively and literally. After this point, it turns into an ad for Mouthwashing. Like, just straight up a teaser trailer. So it's pretty clear cut to me that this little DLC, and by extension, the whole game, is meant to act as a prelude of what would come next. Overall, How Fish is Made and Mouthwashing are incredibly surreal games that you need to check out if you haven't already. I barely scratched the surface when it comes to the characters and all the little details in the spaceship, not to mention their amazing atmospheres and soundtracks. Don't get me wrong, I know these are both super weird, but I think it's in the best way possible, really making you question things while also hitting you with one of these. This was 3 minutes long, by the way. If I learned anything from these games, it's that I'd much rather use a breath mint. Oh yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.